Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with.
Hi and welcome. Today, Great.com talks with Jennifer Ayers and Eric Winokur. They are the Executive Director and the President of Board of Directors for Alive. And if you haven't heard of them before, they are an organization dedicated to alleviate suffering caused by poverty and to improve lives of those in need in the city of Alexandria. And if you're new here into this podcast, you definitely want to press subscribe, either on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to learn what Alive is doing to help improve lives. So Jennifer and Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Jennifer, how would you describe Alive to someone that is not familiar with your organization?
Well, I describe it as a safety net organization that provides basic needs services. So what we're there to do is to help people with what they need to get by in their everyday lives. And we do that through a few different types of programs. Our main program, and what most people know us for, is food assistance. So we provide food to people who need about 5 days worth of food for a family of 5. Several times a month. And we also do home delivery to people who can't come to those distributions. Right now, through the pandemic, they've been drive-through. Before, people used to come to a center at a school and pick up their groceries once a month. Now we're doing that 5 or 6 times a month. And we're feeding about 4,000 households per month. So about, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 individuals every month that are experiencing some level of food insecurity. And we provide what we like to think of as nutritious food. So about 4 bags of shelf-stable food, a family-sized pack of chicken, fresh bread, eggs, and produce, so that they can make some meals out of those. We also provide houseware. So people coming out of homelessness or who don't have extra funds to buy the basics, we have plates and knives and forks and microwaves and things like that are donated, and then we hand them off to people. We have also a furniture program. It's been on hold for a few months, or say over a year, actually, with the pandemic, where we provide furniture, very basic furniture, mattresses, dining chairs and tables, couches, to people who need basic furniture in their homes. We also provide towels and linens. You don't think about those as something everybody needs, but they're expensive. You have to go to the store and buy them. They add up quickly. And we also provide financial support. So up to $500 per household twice a year for people who need a little extra help with rent or utilities or medical bills. And we have a small shelter for women and children in Old Town Alexandria, which is one of the oldest transitional shelters in the state of Virginia. And women and children can stay there up to 2 years while they save money for permanent housing. So that's what we do. So it's a lot of very basic needs, and it's actually really increased during the pandemic. So.
I can imagine.
In a year, yeah.
Those needs are basic, but I can imagine how important they must be to the people that receive them and don't have those basic needs. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Thanks. And Alive's kind of interesting. We were started in 1969 by 14 faith communities, here in the city of Alexandria. And today there's 47 congregations that are involved. So those different faith communities from all different faiths come together to help supply volunteers, get the word out, and raise support for the organization.
That's interesting. Let me come back to that and ask you, so what is, for someone that is not maybe living in the US or is from Alexandria, what is it, the kind of needs you see, and how has that changed with the pandemic?
There's always been some level of food insecurity at the margins, and that has just increased significantly with the pandemic. So before, people were kind of getting by. Maybe they worked 2 or 3 jobs, or they drove for Uber. So they may have lost their Uber job, and then all of a sudden they're facing a situation where they're having trouble making ends meet. So they start to fall a little bit behind on their rent, or they don't have quite enough to buy food. So if we can supply food, we offset some of that money that can go back to paying their housing. The DC metro area and Alexandria is part of that is a very high cost of living. So it costs a lot to live here. So many of our families are immigrant families. They're coming from other parts of the country or other parts of the world, and they don't have the high level of education or the white collar jobs. So that they're working really hard, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, and sometimes sharing apartments. So there could be 2 or 3 families living per apartment. So all the work that we do sort of helps them be able to put their money where it needs to go, which is into housing or education, versus trying to put food on the table and pay those basic needs. So we're really keeping people going. And those needs just, I think, basic what we're seeing have really just increased significantly. So if we were doing 400 or so people before the pandemic, families, I should say, we're doing 4,000. We were doing about 30,000 pounds of food before the pandemic. Now we're doing about 200,000 pounds of food per month, which is just so much more. So those people that were making it and doing really well are really struggling right now because they've lost that second job or that third job. And our people work. So most of our clients are working at least one job. There's always this mythology that people can just work harder and they'll be able to take care of themselves. But when you fall behind on your rent, you're charged late fees and then you're charged more late fees. So that people fall further into debt. So we're trying to help people, have some of that basic support that they need to keep going.
Well, that's a really, really hard spot. And
it could be, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess you're being squeezed from 2 sides as well. Both you have this increased need, but also maybe the people that are making the donations from these congregations have less ability to make contributions as well.
I would have thought so, but actually our generosity in our giving has gone up incredibly in the last year. So our community has really opened up, not just through our congregations, but also the community at large. So small businesses, individuals. So our giving has actually increased significantly. So we've been able to really fulfill the need as it arises. We've done a lot of scaling. We bought trucks, we bought equipment. We had to purchase food for a while because supply chains were limited early in the pandemic. So before we would sort of take more food donations. Now we're purchasing more of those kinds of things. So it's really changed. And I'm really grateful to live where we live because we've seen people just come and call up early in the pandemic, what can I do to help? And then what's going on? I tell a story and then we'd get a big check following that short phone call. So I was really, I think, overwhelmed by that level of generosity. And that's promising in a lot of ways.
That is really beautiful to hear that we as humans are coming together in a crisis like this.
Mm-hmm.
So let me direct the question to Eric then and ask, for someone that is not living in the US, maybe in Europe, or doesn't know what is going on in Alexandria, is there something you would like for them to know about the work that you do?
So I think that if you're outside the US, the pandemic's global. And so probably what's happening in your community is reflected here, that people have struggled as Jen mentioned. The economy is having problems. I think we know, as Jen said, that the numbers increased and the need was out there. Citizens in Alexandria have been generous, and we've also benefited from some government programs. The city of Alexandria has really facilitated a response that it's they've been concerned and come through in giving us space to work and material support of giving us access to some buses to help transport the large, the huge amounts of food that we're distributing each month, which is 3, 4, maybe 5 times greater than had previously been. We just didn't have the equipment. So the government, the city has come through, and the concerned citizens have come through. And so although we've had to change what we've done to operate in the pandemic environment. Having that support has let us continue to serve those in need and to meet the increased number of people that are out there that need our help.
That is beautiful to hear. And thank you for acknowledging that it is a global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So what have you guys learned then you've been working in your role for 2 years now, which is the whole pandemic. What have you learned? What lessons can you take with you moving forward?
So, this is interesting that I guess Jen started as our new executive director just after I started as the president. No, I don't think when we interviewed Jen, we had, respond to pandemic as one of the job requirements. But, so she was on the job about 6 months and then everything changed. And we had a bunch of conversations early on at, how's this going to work? As Jen said, we had great funding support, but we were worried for a while, would there be support? How would we continue? As Jen mentioned, we had to, for safety reasons, stop our furniture delivery, stop our housewares delivery program, because we just didn't know, with the furniture delivery going into, someone's house to collect the furniture, going into someone's apartment to deliver the furniture just was not feasible in the pandemic situation where we had to put, volunteer and staff safety at, a high level for the entire time that Alive has been in existence. We've relied heavily on volunteers. We have great volunteers and hundreds of volunteers each month for the furniture delivery. Member congregations provide a team. Each congregation is designated one weekend of the year, and so we have people coming together to help deliver the furniture. But that wasn't feasible in pandemic. The food, the nature of how we provided the food from a large, everything happening inside a room had to be restructured. And we went to an outdoor unload off the back of a truck into people's trunks of their cars, non-contact. But Jen and our food program director had to rethink this new way to get food to more people than had ever been served. And, that happened early in the pandemic response, but it took their effort and creativity to come up with something that we could still pull off and keep people's safety and health in mind. Because in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know, could we, how long could we be in the same space with a person? Could we, could we transmit it to someone? We had to make sure that we weren't transmitting virus to someone that was receiving help from us. That would, so we needed to take all this into account. I think we've done a good job of being careful, as careful as we could be, and still being out there to provide services.
I think I've learned, also that there's just a lot of partners and a lot of ways to work together. So, Eric mentioned before the city government being very supportive, and that's very true. But just telling people what our challenges were and being upfront about that, hey, we don't have all the answers, but we need the solution, and asking really pull people in to the organization and really help them work with us to find some of that creative support. We had someone donate a refrigerated truck container. That's huge, that we can keep cold. The city's given us a place to put it. So people really, if you say, hey, I have this problem and I don't know the answer, they've been coming to us and saying, well, let's figure out how we can work together. The city too has come to us and said, well, we needed to get information about COVID out to people. So for a long time, we were handing out flyers with all our food bags talking about hand washing. We've handed out masks and hand sanitizers because they were easy to put into our pre-made bags. We had to think about supply chain very differently than we did before. So just a lot of different kinds of things that we didn't have to think about because of social distance and because of hand washing and wearing masks, that we were able to say, hey, we don't know how to do this, but tell us what you need and we're going to work together to figure it out. And it's largely worked. We even had people registering for vaccinations at our eviction outreach events. So people are really connecting those dots as looking at us as like, okay, this is a place where we're meeting a lot of people where they are, but let's see what else we can give them while they're here. So I think that's been transformative for the organization. And also, we just have so many more new partners. And when you do things together, we're not competing for the same resources. We're all kind of acknowledging that this takes a whole group of people to do, and we're going to figure it out. So I think that's been something that's different. And as an executive director, you like to have everything planned with your goals and objectives, and that didn't happen this year. We said, okay, we got to figure this out. Let's just tell people what's going on and pick up your phone and ask, and it's worked out. So.
Beautiful to see that you transformed that uncertainty into new opportunities.
Yeah, a lot of new partnerships, which has been great.
I can imagine. So moving forward then, what is the vision you have for Alive for the next 10 years?
Oh, that's a big question. I think the board needs to sort of think through just how the landscape has changed. I think a lot of groups globally and locally are struggling with is sort of what's next. What's the long-term impact of this? How long are we going to feel the effect from the pandemic? We were able to start with partners in eviction prevention program, where we help connect people to existing resources, just helping people understand how to fill out an application or what forms they need to submit for help. And we've learned that that's a real gap. So there's a lot of assistance out there, but if people don't know how to access it, that's an issue. So we're looking at, with the city, trying to figure out ways where we can share resources to bring food to where people are, have them come to be more neighborhood based, and at the same time, try to see as a trusted partner what some of their other needs might be, and then get those connected to those resources. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know how high the numbers will stay. So that's a big question mark, and I think everybody struggles with that. But we know that there is increased need, and that will probably be with us for a while. And there's a lot. I think there's a lot going on through our federal government, our local government, to try and address those with organizations like ours. So we're just hoping we're ready, and we can continue to be there.
I hope so as well.
Yeah.
So someone listening to this also hoping that you can keep being there. What can they do to stay up to date with Alive? And also, what can they do as an individual to take some kind of positive action step here?
I think if they're local, there's certainly volunteer opportunities. Sort of at the national level, I think paying attention to food security in general, that food supply chain is extremely critical. So, making sure that people understand where they source their food from, how food moves from farm to table, what those things look like. I think early in the pandemic, everybody was doing it. Everyone bought things in bulk. They bought soup and they bought canned goods because nobody knew what was going to happen. That really shortened the supply for people who were already food insecure. So just having the ability to share assets and to make sure that the food supply chain is open is important. Making sure that people can help. Financial contributions help people with their rent or their utilities, and just helping to recognize where there's gaps in services. So sometimes people don't qualify for government support, but they may be on that edge and just need a little bit of extra help. So, Alive likes to say like neighbors helping neighbors because we're very local, but I think that can be done on lots of different levels. Just kind of knowing who's in your neighborhood, what you can do to pitch in a little bit will help everybody.
Got it. And I encourage all of our listeners to take those steps. So we're coming towards the end of this interview, and I want to say, Jennifer and Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's our pleasure. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. because that is showing the algorithms that this is an important conversation, so more people can get to know the work that Alive is doing and learn how lives can be improved for those living in poverty in Alexandria. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
What is great.com? That is the most common question that we get. And the shortest answer I can give you is that we are a company that is moving money from the online casino industry and donates it to charities that is helping the environment. The long answer, unfortunately I don't have time to tell you today. But if you're curious, definitely Google what is great.com to learn more.